And we have to break out of our little bubbles and recognize that this is something that we have to put an emphasis on. Have you ever heard your spouse say, honey, you cannot say anything because they will take away my badge and my gun? Or have you ever just had a gut feeling that if you say anything, that there's probably consequences? Because, guys, this is the stigma we are dealing with today. And as a spouse, this is sometimes where we feel so alone. So, what are we going to do? Welcome to episode 2, where we're going to talk about the stigma. Oh, my kids would be so embarrassed if they knew that I just did that. But I want to read a stat here for you. Law enforcement officers face 54% higher risk of dying by suicide. Wait, what? Did anybody say yes in their vows to, yes, I agree to love you, even though I know the stats and the risk of suicide is higher because of your occupation? No, we didn't. So I'm so excited about today's episode because the stigma is big and it is real to us as spouses of law enforcement officers. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to break down this wall. So go grab a sledgehammer and let's break it down together because I'm not okay with that stat, and I'm sure you're not either. Welcome to Code 44, a podcast designed for spouses and families of law enforcement because the job doesn't end at the end of the shift. And as spouses, we see the signs first at home, but sometimes we just don't know what to do. My name's Amy Cortez, and I left my corporate job of 30 years as an executive because I feel so passionate about this topic. As I shared, my husband has served over 30 years in law enforcement, and over the last few years, we have experienced 4 deaths by suicide of law enforcement in our small community. And that's not okay with me. And I feel that it's time for us as spouses and families to come together and start doing something. So I really hope you join me in this journey. So let's start with the key driver, stigma. The textbook definition, let me read it here. A mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. So pulse check. How many of you jumped 10 steps ahead and already got angry at that definition? Well, so am I. So let's go. Why does this exist? In order for me to get a real experience here, and not just my own definition, I asked my great friend, ChatGPT, to give me the reasons behind the mental stigma in law enforcement. And here's what it said. First, culture of toughness. Police culture often demands that officers be emotionally strong, resilient, and tough. Admitting to stress or seeking help can be seen as a sign of weakness that goes against this core value. Wow, okay, this just got real. So I'm sure many of you who are listening to this have flown in the past. I know in my past with my job, I've flown a lot. And so what first comes to mind when I heard that definition is what you hear every time before you take off on an airplane. It goes something like this. If the cabin pressure changes, pull down the mask to start the flow of oxygen. But remember to put your own mask on first before assisting others. Wait, what did they say? Put on your mask before helping someone else. Why? Well, seems kind of simple in that example, right? If you don't put on your own mask, you might not survive to help the person next to you. Shut the front door, right? Why is this different from daily direction? I think about what our spouses and family members are called to do as law enforcement, to help others. And so this example of the oxygen mask might sound silly to you, But if they're not taking care of themselves, if they're not communicating that they need help, and if they're not putting on their own oxygen, then how can we expect them to show up at a call and be able to respond to somebody else's situation that is happening? Now, I'm going to 1,000% agree that admitting that you need help is hard, which is part of the stigma, right? But in order for us to break down these barriers, we have to fight this together. It is expected of us and of the officer to take care of themselves, just like the example of the oxygen mask. Do you think if an emergency happened on an airplane, that an individual would say, "Oh, no, we lost oxygen, but I am not going to put on that mask. I'm strong, I'm tough. It's going to be a sign of weakness if I put on that oxygen mask"? No, not at all. So why is it different in a situation of law enforcement? Okay, ChatGPT, what else do you have for me? Well, here's the second definition it gave: fear of professional consequences. Officers worry that seeking mental health care will negatively impact their career, leading to a fear of being labeled as unstable or weak. This can include fears of being passed over for a promotion or losing respect from supervisors and colleagues. So they fear if people know that they are struggling and need help, that it's going to have a negative impact. Got it. Okay, so let's dive into this one. Does anyone go to the dentist? Silly question, right? Do you get regular cleanings? Okay, if you answered no, we might need another podcast for that, but let's try a different one. Women, does anyone remember what October is? It's Breast Care Awareness Month, a month where we check up on all of our girlfriends to ensure that they've had their things checked out, right? Or what about that fantastic, awesome, amazing annual appointment that us females always go to? I told you this podcast was going to get real. Here we are. I'm sure none of us love going to the gynecologist. And if you're a man listening to this, why do you go get annual blood work? Or any other test that men need to have, right? It's for preventive. So let me ask you a question. Do you announce to everybody when you have a dentist appointment? Okay, well, maybe some of you do, but you don't have to. It's a choice. No, it's not required for you to tell anybody or your boss. We just do what we need to do. So here's what I'm going to say to that. If there is a fear of consequences, but it's a preventative measure that we need for our mental health because of the strain that our job puts on us, why do we have to communicate that to anybody? I think the answer is simple. You don't. And it's expected of you to get your teeth cleaned, right? You get your teeth cleaned so that they can identify any early cavities. They can take care of the issue before you have to have a root canal. I truly feel mental health can go along the same ways, especially with our law enforcement officers who see things on a daily basis that our brains are just not meant to see. Now, I know personally, my husband goes to the doctor, the dentist, the counselor an hour away from our community. Not because he doesn't like the counselors in our community, but because it makes him feel more comfortable that when he's out in public, maybe when he's responding to a call, that he doesn't have to run into that individual. Maybe that's something that you can discuss with your spouse because you're a team here and no one needs to know where you go, when you go, or how often you go. And here's a word of caution that I would say. Be mindful that if your spouse agrees to counseling or to get help, that when you're out having a conversation with friends, don't expose that. I've been in situations where spouses unintentionally have announced it, and you can just kind of feel that the air in the room shift a little bit, and maybe that spouse feels a little bit uncomfortable. And so my point is, you don't always announce when you go to the dentist. You don't have to announce when you go to a counselor. And by feeling more comfortable in doing it, hopefully that breaks down some of the stigma. Because in order for us to break down the stigma, we have to make the mental checkups the same as a dentist appointment or blood work, just standard. The stigma is so real. And honestly, if the mental condition gets too far down the road, it could cost them their badge and it could cost them their job. But just like any of our other appointments, we have to start with those regular checkups so that it can be identified early where the problem is. Because if they take care of the small things, the big things might not be such an impact. So let's talk about just some efforts to reduce the stigma together. What are some of the things that we can do? I believe that promoting open discussion is so important. I know in our community, the leaders and organizations are trying to normalize mental health. I've seen huge strides in our community in just over the last year. But the open discussions can't be reliant on what everybody else is doing out in the community, and it can't be reliant on just the work that they're doing. We have to do it together, and we have to break out of our little bubbles and recognize that this is something that we have to put an emphasis on. Providing support systems. We're going to talk a lot about this in future podcasts because it's not if a crisis happens, what are we going to do? It needs to be more about when the crisis happens. Do we have the things in place to support our spouses and our family members to the fullest amount of our ability? And the last one that comes to mind is training and education. My hope for this podcast is that while our officers are getting training at work and help from their peers, my wish is that that also extends home. I know for me, sometimes I put myself in a bubble and think I just need to normalize things at home to make it better for him. But I don't believe that to be the case. We have to be real. We have to be real and understanding to what they see, and we have to put things in place to be able to help them. And that is the only way that we are going to break this stigma together. Here's what I believe to be reality today. Now more than ever, it is okay to say that you're not okay. I also truly believe that now more than ever, spouses and family members, you are not in this alone. And we can talk about this and we can help each other. For our spouses who might feel like this is just part of their job to struggle with the mental side of it and to feel like they just have to deal with it, no, they don't. And as we discussed in the first episode, I don't feel anyone is designed to see this on an ongoing basis. And so we've got to put all the things into place to help them. And I'm going to end with a story. And I share the stories in hopes that they resonate with you or that you can say, I see myself in that situation, or I see my spouse in that situation, and I'm not alone, and I can do something, I can help. Many years ago, my spouse said something, and it still resonates in my brain today and that I think about often. He said something along the lines of, I think God's punishing me with all the things that I have to see now, or rather the things that he can't unsee. But he felt as if he was being punished somehow for the wrongdoings that maybe he had done in his life. When he said that, my response was something along the lines of, honey, I don't believe that to be the case. I think you're right where you need to be. But fast forward about 5 days later, my husband was visiting a friend of his at the hospital. And as he was walking out of the hospital and he was in the parking lot, a lady walked up to him and said, "Are you Mike?" And he smiled and he said, "I am. Is that good or is that bad?" And she ran into his arms and she hugged him and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, "Thank you so much. You responded." This makes me a little emotional. "You responded to my daughter's fatal accident. You were there when she took her last breath. And my husband and I have so much comfort and peace knowing that you were there with her and that she felt safe." He called me right after that and he said, "Honey, remember that conversation we were having a few days ago? And I said I felt like I was being punished. And remember you said, no, you're not. You're right where God wants you." He said, "Darn you." Maybe he didn't say darn you, but I'm going to say darn you on this podcast. "Darn you. You were right." And he shared with me what had just happened. Our spouses might feel like this is a torment often. And honestly, it probably is a torment. But I truly believe that each one of our spouses and family members that are in law enforcement are there for a purpose and for a reason. And sometimes they're there in the toughest of times when people have emergencies and when they take their last breaths and when there are those terrible incidents that happen. But I believe that they are there on purpose and for a purpose. And my hope and my desire is that us as family can get our arms around them and be with them in those tough times and help bring them back so that they can do their jobs when people need them. I shared with you that my husband was in law enforcement for over 30 years. What I didn't share yet is that he's currently serving as sheriff of Hancock County. And as he was running for sheriff, which is an elected official, one of his main platforms was the mental health of our law enforcement and his desire and need to make it better. That comes from a place of knowing. My husband, as I said, was in the darkest of places, which I'll share in later episodes. He has a whole team underneath him now that he wants to ensure that they get the help that they need. And guys, by going on this journey with me right now, I don't know where you're at, what state. I hope this is reaching all sorts of people. What I want to do is reach the spouses. I want to reach you so that you know that you're not alone. I see you and I continue to make a commitment to help you through it. So Code 44 is about recognizing, responding, and supporting. So here's my ask of you today. Reflect. Are you having open conversations with your spouse or family member that's in law enforcement? Are you helping them to discern between the truth and the lies of what daily maintenance is truly expected of them versus what would cost them their job? I think that's a big one. Are you breaking down the stigma by not being afraid to contribute to the solution? I'm going to leave you with this quick prayer. Lord, help us as spouses and family members to break the stigma and help our law enforcement officers seek the assistance that they need today. Thank you for joining me today. If you haven't hit subscribe, please do so that you can be notified when the next episode drops. And it also helps me understand if my topics are resonating with you and if they're speaking to you. I hope you join me on a future episode of Code 44.